Hello guys and welcome to a new Wargame video today by me Vulcan. Today we're going to be looking at the PACT units. Yay at last. Basically I'm going to be going through the logistics and the recon units today for the PACT side. So let's get on with it. Get rid of the damn NATO side. Damn them. Right, anyway, let's get on with this. Okay, first of all, the BDRM2U. This is... okay, the best, I would say. No, I'm already doing it. PACT command vehicle. I really like this. The reason being is you can call in 4 of these, which is unlike any other command vehicle. Most armored command vehicles you can only bring in 2 of, and then therefore you have to take up 2 deck slots to bring in 2 armored types of CV. So what's good about the BDRM2U is it has that one front armor to stop it getting RT'd easy. It's fast, it can get into position, it can go quite a distance, and you can bring in 4 of them, which means you can capture all the sectors you need, especially for a 1v1, and it only takes up 1 deck slot, which is amazing. It doesn't have any armaments, which makes sure it doesn't give away its position, which is also a good thing, because some command vehicles that have machine guns will accidentally give away their positions by firing on the enemy with them, and therefore they become revealed if they're hidden in a forest, and that can be quite disastrous. And that's exactly what's wrong with the BRM-1K. Now, this is a command armor that has a very specific use. It's not one that you'd bring in normally. The cost is 30 more than a normal command vehicle, and it does have its own cannon. So the trouble is with this, you never want to use a CV for combat. The only reason it has a gun that can shoot both tanks and infantry, by the way, is just to defend itself. So it's likely to be in places where you're unsure there's enemies nearby. But then again, you shouldn't be making that risk anyway, or the assumption. And it's kind of going to get yourself killed if you're going to try and use this as a forward pushing CV, you know? It can't defend itself from AA at all, or helicopters even. It can't defend itself from helicopters because it doesn't have a machine gun. It just has that cannon which can attack tanks or infantry. So anyway, it's one of the tanks that you'd put in a forward position. So say you've got 2 sectors at the back which maybe have unarmored CVs in them, which I would never recommend, but saying you do, and then you'd have one of these further up in like a sector closer to the enemy, just in case it gets discovered. That's the only reason I would ever suggest bringing these on your deck. But the BRDM2U really fills any role you need for a CV. And it doesn't need a weapon. It should be protected, and it shouldn't be in places where it will get attacked, because that's not what you want. The first UAZ, which is the first unarmored command vehicle, this is the East German variant, and it's not good because it's unarmored. I've never really ever recommended having unarmored command vehicles because they can get RT'd easily, they can get sniped easily by helicopters, and even if they're out in the open with AA protecting them, they're going to die, because, you know, they can helicopter rush the point, and generally, say if somebody brings in 4 Gazelle cannons on NATO and rushes them towards your command vehicle, then you won't be able to shoot down those Gazelles quick enough before they even shoot the thing. So it's only going to take a few shots to destroy, and when it is dead, you're going to regret bringing it in. So moving on to the Mi-2D, this is the command vehicle on PACT, which is a helicopter. There's an equivalent on the NATO side, which is obviously the Huey version. And again, this is a very specific, it has a very specific role. It's really good for securing sectors on large maps. So say you start a game and you see a reinforcement point maybe quite close to the enemy but far away, and you need to get to it quickly just so you can like sort of ambush them from behind. Using one of these, you can kind of sneak up to that and land there, and they won't expect it, and then bring in reinforcements really quickly to defend it. And That's really the only use that I can see with a command helicopter. You would never normally use a command helicopter because of that extra cost to defend or capture a base close to your original sector. And also the fact that it can't hide in forests is very, very hard, and makes it very easy to spot. The size of it isn't great either, so it's going to get, like I say, spotted really easily, and when it's on the ground it can pretty much get one-shotted by any tank, rocketed by any infantry, and yeah, until you take it off, and then it's going to be shot down by AA. So what someone can do, and a really good way to counter someone's command vehicle helicopter play, is literally just have an AA by it. As soon as it takes off, it'll get shot down. They have like no health, so I just wouldn't recommend it unless you have a specific strategy that relies on having the command helicopter. That's the only reason I would ever really take one. And then finally you got the UAZ, which is exactly the same as the Führungs UAZ, but it's the Russian version. Then you got the FOB. Again, similar principles to the NATO stuff. Bring them in if you need them. If not, you can delete your original FOB to get 100 points back. So say if you start a game with 1,500 points, if you delete your FOB, you will get an extra 100 points on top of that. So you'll start with 1,600 points, but you won't have the extra supply. That's up to you. It goes with the strategy. You can bring in extra if you want to go heavy arty strategy, heavy long range arty at least. Or maybe you just want to have a good resupply system going if you're good at microing the resupply. So it's up to you. I would never really recommend having more than 2 in a 1v1 because you're wasting your points. And if you're playing like 3v3 or 4v4, always designate one person to placing FOBs, because then it's very easy for them to coordinate, and they can be your resupply master while the rest of you take care with all of your points of the enemy while your friend resupplies you. So if you're planning to do any team play, then that's a really good strategy to use. The Kolos, this is the first logistics unit that the first resupply unit that the PACT have. It's a Czech unit and is known to be one of the best carriers. It's similar to the Hempt in that it's armoured, and it has a reasonably good speed. It's quite good off-road with the 4 wheels, or it has on either side. It actually has 8 wheels overall, and it does have an MG to defend itself. Now that MG, once it's run out of supply, so you send it towards the enemy, the MG can do a reasonable amount of damage to infantry, so bear that in mind. Also, it can get underneath helicopters and shoot them down, so that could also be a use. Say if you've used up the resupply and you've run out at your FOB and you don't have any way to like get resupply the resupply truck, then you can use it offensively, and that's quite a good thing to do with them. And also, it doesn't really matter if they get captured, because all it does is increase the enemy's unit count, so they might hit the cap quicker, especially if it's an extremely long game. Then you've got the Mi-26. Now this is a very controversial unit. It's an extremely big supply helicopter. Comes in with 5,000 supply, and that's half an FOB's worth of supply, which is a lot. It's very slow, but it's massive, and it has a reasonably good amount of health. So it takes about two shots to shoot down, maybe a couple of tank shells if it's on the ground, but it has all that resupply. You can see in the picture, like a tank is like, I don't know, you can fit 2 tanks in that thing easy in the back of it. But yeah, it comes with all that supply, and it's one of those, if you want, say, a forward base of I don't know, say you're using quite heavy units and you need a place to retreat them to, the place where you retreat them to would have an Mi-26 in there, because you know, the constant supply will help heavily armored units, and units that use expensive ammo will get resupplied as they're needed, because the Mi-26 won't run out of supply so easily compared to other units. The Kolos has 1,250. That's 750 less, I think. Let's just have a look. Actually, it's only 250 less than the USA Hempt. So that's much more worth it compared, I think. The T813 is exactly the same. It's just an East German variant. So if you prefer the Czechs, get the Kolos. If you prefer the T1813 or T813, then get the East German variant. Also, what you can do is if you're not taking an Mi-26 on your deck because you don't want to risk losing it, because they do cost a lot of points, and if they do get shot down, they're quite easy to shoot down because they're so big. If you don't want to risk it, or you're playing on a map where you don't need it, then just take the Kolos and the T813 both in the same deck, because that means that you're never going to run out of resupply units if that's the case. And also, it just makes up for the fact that you're probably only going to be having one command vehicle on your deck, so you can use the extra deck slot to bring in an extra resupply vehicle. But it's up to you. You can probably use it for something else. Then you got the Urals. These are the standard slow resupply vehicles. The upgraded version of the Ural is okay. If you don't want to bring in armored ones, you can bring in unarmored ones. Unarmored ones are generally good for supporting infantry because they're cheap and you don't really care if you lose them. And generally the enemy won't aim for the resupply vehicles if you keep them far enough back in forests, because they won't be able to see them. Your infantry will just get resupplied if they stay in a radius. So yeah, Urals are good for supporting infantry pushes, but generally the Kolos and T18 or T813 do that just as well. So they just cost 10 more and they're armored, which I think is definitely worth it. Now you can get a Polish variant and you can get the Russian variant, and the Russian variant upgraded, which has 250 resupply less than a T813. But again, I honestly seriously recommend you either use the Kolos or the T813 for ground and Mi-26 for air, considering it's the only air supply helicopter you can get on the PACT side. NATO have two. They have the Puma and the Chinook, and the Super Chinook actually, so they have three, and the PACT only have one, but it's 3 times as big. So yeah. Now moving on to recon, we've got the ALF KLFZ UAZ. Basically, it's a good vehicle. I haven't unlocked it because I use the German variant. I use the Russian variant, so I haven't unlocked the East German variant. Nothing wrong with it. It's a totally personal preference. You'll find that with a lot of things in the PACT deck, there is basically identical units with different flags, and that's the case a lot of the time. So anyway, you can get the normal UAZ without a weapon, which is fast, and it's small, which means it can hide very easily, and it has a very good optics. So I think that's pretty much the best you can get on the ground for PACT, except from the BRM1, which is a sort of an APC kind of recon thing, but I'll get to that in a second. Anyway, yeah, it's got basically the best recon other than that unit I just pointed out, and the speed is 70 km/h. It's small. It can stay hidden, and it can move all around the map without really running out of fuel, which is awesome. You can get another variant of it which has a machine gun, but I would never recommend getting it, mainly because you don't want the recon to give away its position, and having a machine gun on it is only ever going to do that, and the machine gun's not very powerful to even be useful. So why pay the extra when you don't need it? And also the second vehicle's slower, so to me that's a no-brainer. But moving on to the BRDM1, this is the sister of the BRDM2, which is the command vehicle version. You can get the BRDM2, but it comes with the machine gun. These units are recon that you basically can waste. You just charge them to the enemy. They're good for spreading out, you can spread them out across the map, and recon units that you would otherwise sort of forget about if you weren't using these kind of units, because although they only have good optics, they can still be useful in poking into places that you may think the enemy has, because you don't have to worry about losing them. However, there is one unit on the PACT side that I would much prefer doing that with, and that's the SPW40B, which I actually did some reconning with that in one of my other videos, but I'll get to that. Anyway, the BRDM2 is slightly faster and has the better, actually it's a worse machine gun on it. I didn't even realise that. Well, this apparently comes with a better machine gun, and well, you're paying 5 more for the speed, really. That's all you're really paying for. Paying for speed and extra fuel capacity. But a worse weapon, not that the weapon really matters. You're just poking into places that you want to see if there's anything there. Now, this is quite a good vehicle, the Vidra, because it comes with a recoilless rifle, and that means it can actually do damage to things like CVs if it does bump into them. So when you bump into a CV, it's generally going to be in the middle of the forest, so you're going to be very, very close to it, and the recoilless rifle at very, very close range can do a serious amount of damage. So this vehicle is really good for poking into places where you know there's like maybe a small presence of units, maybe infantry or maybe APCs, which are just there to be annoying, and you can send in one of these to harass them with a recoilless rifle. Just remember that they only have 8 rounds of ammo, so it won't last long. And you see their speed's really fast, so they can scout around really, really quickly, but remember, they're going to have to be quite close to the enemy to spot them, because they only have good optics. All of these units have the 1 front armor, which means they're pretty much RT proof. Obviously, concentrated RT will destroy them, but that 1 front armor basically stops them being insta-killed. Now we got the BRM1. Now this unit has a very specific role. It sits in the same place for pretty much the whole game, but you put it in a place that's so valuable that basically it gives you all the information of an entire area. The exceptional optics on this tank basically means that you can sit it in the edge of a tree line and it will see everything for miles, and it can be incredibly useful. However, it does cost 65 points, and if you use my strategy, which is using the SPW40Bs, then I wouldn't recommend using this vehicle. If you're one of those people who likes to be well aware of your flanks, these are really good for doing that. They can, if you put 1 on each side of the map, for instance, on your flanks, then you will know instantly when anything's around there, because these spot them really easily. That's what it can be used for. But it's not the sort of recon that you'd use to support any or your friendly tanks or anything like that, because it's too expensive for that role. It really is. It's the same price as an MI2, as you can see, which is a helicopter version. So why wouldn't you take a helicopter? But yeah, 60 kilometers per hour, 1 front armor, 1 side armor, quite resistant to artillery, but it still can get RT to death. And it doesn't have anything to defend itself against aircraft if aircraft fly over it. It only has that main gun, so be aware of that. Now the MI2, this is the first of the PACT air recon. It's a small unit, it's a small helicopter. Speed of 260 kilometers per hour isn't great for a recon helicopter, and it doesn't have much health. It only has about 5 bars of health. Obviously it doesn't have any armor, because no helicopter has armor, but yeah, it has about 5 health, so it get one shot by any AA unit on NATO which has 5 HE, which I think is the Chaparral and the Marder. So, well, at least the upgraded Marder both have 5 HE at least. So you're gonna be shot down 1 shot in most cases. Yeah, it's very good optics. But yeah, I don't know, it can run out of fuel occasionally if you use it to move around too much. I've had that happen to me. So be wary of that. the speed isn't really good enough for a recon helicopter, and there's the Mi-9, which is a lot more reliable for its role. Now the Mi-2 US, however, it can be useful. The Mi-2 US comes with an autocannon, which isn't incredibly accurate and can be quite annoying because of that, but it does have an autocannon nonetheless. So say if you scout something, this is sort of a similar thing that I do with my Gazelle, my Gazelle Recon, and then my Gazelle cannons when I scout out with them. This does it all in one sort of unit. So basically you'd scout something, and then if you saw it and it was valuable, then you could attack it with the autocannon. Just be careful not to get it shot down, because it does cost 75 points, and that's quite a lot to lose. Yeah, so be careful, but you can, like, for instance, snipe enemy recon helicopters out of the sky, especially Gazelles, with that autocannon. Now the next variant has an autocannon and rocket pods, but these, honestly, the rocket pods aren't needed. Like, the Mi-2 urn can be good if you know that you're going to get rushed against, but you never really know that. And it can, say if you use the urn and then you spot that they're rushing, then it can be useful in a way, because these rocket pods can be fired from 2,400 meters away, which is useful, and they do have quite a lot of ammo for it, so it's going to get the job done. Now the speed is 260 kilometers per hour, same as the rest, and again the fuel capacity and operational range isn't amazing, so be careful that you don't run out of fuel. But this is sort of the recon helicopter you take if you're worried about the rushes. Now the Mi-2 LSK is basically the Mi-2 variant, but it's East German. The Mi-9 is the next recon helicopter. Now I like this a lot more. It's a lot bigger, but it's got that extra speed, the 290 km per hour speed. It has the extra operational range. It can be used to sort of fly around and check that everything's okay while the battle's going on. And the exceptional optics, of course. Most recon helicopters have that exceptional optics. I believe, actually. No, it doesn't. The Mi-2s, that's right. The Mi-2s only have very good optics. The Mi-9 has exceptional optics, which makes it much, much better, especially being an air unit. Air units, air recon units, have a massive bonus of line of sight. Well, not being affected by line of sight so much. So having exceptional optics compared to very good optics on a helicopter is crazy. And it's up to you whether you want to go an Mi-2 with very good optics and stopping rushes, or you go with the Mi-9 and maybe, you know, it flies around quicker and it's much more aware of what's going on. So if you want to be more aware, then use the Mi-9s, and you only really need one of them because you can fly them backwards and forwards and they should be fine. Whereas the Mi-2 often runs out of fuel, but with its only 350 kilometer operational range. So if you keep it in the sky too long and you don't go back to refuel it, it can get stranded, which can be annoying. So yeah, anyway. Moving on to the PT-76B, this is commonly known as one of the favourite PACT recon units. I know a lot of people like these units because they are good. The PT-76B and the PT-71 aren't amazing because they don't have the very good optics, they only have good optics. But they can be useful, for instance, the 25 cost of the PT-76, for rushing up roads and securing little positions from light units like APCs and so on. So if you push this up a road and then you dive into a forest and you maybe bump into a CV, you can kill it. So it's useful for that, but it doesn't have anything to defend itself from the air. It only has that main gun again, so be wary of that. The second variant has an ATGM with only an accuracy of 4, and it only has 4 missiles, but this can be lucky occasionally. So don't rely on it, but you know, it can be lucky if you want to just spend 30 points for an extra ATGM. You pay an extra 5. So yeah, there is that as well. Only goes 50 kilometers per hour, but on roads it's quite fast, and the front and one front and one side keeps it alive against arty. Now the PT-85 and the PT-90 are really the ones that people like. They have a much more accurate main gun, as you can see, The one that of 45 has an accuracy of 6, AP power of 4, and HE power of 3, and the PT90 has an accuracy of 8 and AP power of 4 and HE power of 3. So you basically get an extra 2 accuracy on the main gun, and you get extra 1 accuracy and an extra 1 AP power on the ATGM. So this is a really good, really good recon unit for supporting tanks. It's really good for that. It has the main gun to really deal with those extra support units that the enemy tanks may have. The ATGM can kind of maybe do damage if it's lucky and hits a tank. It can do quite amount of serious damage. It will stay alive, and it has the fuel capacity and operational range to keep up. And the very good optics will allow it to see into forests and spot the infantry that may be on the edge of the tree line. So there's that, and it's really good for supporting tanks. Also, it can sit on its own at the edge of the map, similar to the BRM1, although being not as effective because the BRM1 has the exceptional optics. But it can take the same role and sit close to the edge of the map and just be there in case something decides to try and sneak around the back. So yeah, it's sort of like maybe a counter recon unit, because it can fire that main gun back at the enemy recon. So yeah, it's good for that, but mainly a support recon for your pushes and so on. And defensive recon more comes in the form of the UAZ or the BRM1. So this is more offensive recon. Now the SPW40B, I was talking about this before, and I've been using this for a very crazy thing. Basically, I'm putting 3 at the beginning of the match. I've got an MO9, so I've got an MO9 and I've got 3 of these. And basically what I'll do, if it's a smaller map, is I'll send 1 down the middle, 1 down the left, 1 down the right, and I'll just send them into all of the common forests that people hide in. And then if it gets destroyed or it spots something, then I know what's around. It's really good for finding stuff. And because it's so cheap at 20 cost, having that little bit of optics allows it to spot stuff before it dies, and then you can see what's there, and you can benefit from that information really well. And then if it doesn't get destroyed, it can just sit there until something goes into that forest, and it's just a waste unit, sort of like a bait or anything like that, and it just finds out what's there. So for instance, in my last PACT video, I sent one of these straight into the middle town in Jewel Fields, and to find out what was in there. And I found Rakuten Jagdpanzers and the Chaparrals, and also the infantry that was sitting in the buildings around there. So, and that was just because it sped down the road really fast, because it has wheels and it has a speed of 60 kilometers per hour. It went straight down the road, straight into the town. It got destroyed about halfway through the town, which is kind of what I expected to happen. But I revealed all the information about all of the units in the area, so for me that was worth 20 points. And eventually it helped me destroy everything with the TATUs. So that information was invaluable to me. So that's really what this is good for, just sort of splitting them off and pushing them into places where you're unsure of what there is there, and they can have 20 points and you can have all the information on their army. That's the trade you're making. Then you got the SPW40PA. This is another fast sort of waste unit you just send towards the enemy, but it has a machine gun. The trouble is that the SP40B does exactly the same thing, it's just cheaper. So, you know, you can use this for different things. This sort of can drive around longer and last longer. It has that armor that the SPW40 doesn't, and it's very fast, and it has a huge operational range and fuel capacity, so it can get around quite a lot and see what it needs to see. It's just that I would much rather use, for instance, a UAZ to do that rather than something that costs a bit more money. The only good thing about this is it's quite good off-road because of the wheels. And the second variant, it's basically the same as the BRM2. So, you know, it just depends if you want to use that instead. That's East German, and the BDRM2s, or BRDM2, is the Russian sort of variant. But yeah, up to you. Like I say, basically, I've probably been saying that this is a BDRM, and that's the BDRM. It's actually the BRDM. I'm sorry, it's just habit. I got that in my head and now I can't get it out. You can get an East German variant of the PT-76B. So yeah, there is that as well. But basically, like I say, a lot of these units are just copies. And then finally, you've got the UAZ, which is exactly the same as the first UAZ. Good for hiding in places and scouting out around the map. It's really, really good for that. Because it's small and it's quite hard to shoot at, it's got a decent optics, so it can just drive around like at a distance and spot things for you while the battle's going on, and then you can hide it in a hedge somewhere and it'll be really, really hard to find. So I think that was demonstrated also in my last PACT video if you want to take a look. Basically, one of my teammates sat one of these UAZs in a hedge line, and it was literally, I don't know, maybe 50 to 100 meters away from enemy APCs, and they didn't spot it, while we were just seeing their entire army. So that was quite funny. But yeah, definitely a good unit to use. You can get it with a machine gun, but like I say, you don't want it with that machine gun because it's going to give away its position. However, the UAZ 469 with the AGS 17 grenade launcher can be very useful. Now I say that because it has a range of 1,750 meters, and if you come across infantry with this thing that are sitting on the edge of a forest, you can pound them to death. And I'm not even kidding, grenade launchers are very effective against infantry. So if you are struggling with infantry and you have the UAZ on your deck, then what you can do, you can get a couple of these and you can rush up to the infantry, stay at the range, and then pound the place where they are, either with the fire position or just target them, depending on whether you can see them or not. And you can pound the forest they're in and take them out, hopefully. But yeah, that's what grenade launchers are really good at, taking out the infantry. So in that case, this is sort of like an anti-infantry unit, but it has that recon to find the infantry. So it's kind of like the Fernspar on the NATO side. They're anti-infantry, which have the extra recon so that they can see infantry in forest before they see them, and that's what they're very good for. Although I wouldn't recommend putting this into a forest because it'll get stuck in the mud all the time with the crappy wheels. These UAZs must stay out in the open ground, or unless they're hiding in either hedges or light cover. So yeah, just be wary of that. But anyway, that's the logistic and recon units for the PACT side. I hope that's helped you guys out. There's not really much to talk about in terms of the logistics for the PACT side, because there's a lot less units than there is on NATO. However, when we get to the tanks and so on, there's a ton more, so those sections will be a lot thicker. But hopefully these I provided good insight and some ideas for you to use for some of these units. And yeah, thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope it's been useful, and I'll see you in the next video, guys. Goodbye.